So we're going to move to our first panel discussion to unpick the findings of this first ever supplier survey, and we're going to hear different perspectives on that supplier-retailer relationship, what's working and what needs to change. There were invitations extended to retail, wholesale representative bodies to participate on this panel. Those invitations were not taken up, but that is okay as well. As I said, there's lots of people represented in the room, but please, will you welcome to the stage right now the CEO of the Agri-Food Regulator, Niamh Lenehan, the Executive Director of Love Irish Food, Conor Kilduff, and Senior Policy Advisor with the Irish Farmers Association, Niamh Brennan. Round of applause for our panel. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on stage here today, and we have a huge amount to unpack. Niamh Lenehan, I'm going to begin with you if I can. We saw the findings there. This is our first survey. Mark told us they're 10 years in. You might give us a bit of the context as to how we got to this point, will you?
Thank you. And look, just first to say, I'm very honoured to be here and really looking forward to all the interaction during the day. Because I know the level of expertise right across the agri-food supply chain that is present here today. So obviously delighted. Just to provide some context, obviously we heard from Mr. Mark White earlier, the GCA of the Grocery Codes Adjudicator, and you know, the regulator significantly, you know, took inspiration from the UK model as well, obviously, and brought it into our own context. But just to say that. There is the response rates, and again, I know the chair mentioned thanks to both the buyers and suppliers that contributed significantly to this. But just to shout out again the collaboration that many businesses here had undertaken with us, because it certainly has made a huge difference in terms of letting the voices of suppliers be heard. And
but the one thing that struck me, Niamh, 306 suppliers.
Yes.
We're scratching the surface, because there's an awful lot more of them out there, so we need more to get involved, don't we? We need to get as big a data pool as we can to establish what's actually happening.
Absolutely, and I mean this is year one. We do have a very significant sample this year in terms of 948 trading relationships, but of course we want more, and many of the businesses here have expressed that to me as well, in terms of, you know, the intention is that this will be an annual item on the
So
calendar.
how are you going to use this? Because obviously the regulator, the primary focus of the regulator is that collaboration piece that we've referenced already. It's not to go around constantly cracking whips and cracking heads and hope that you get a better outcome. It's about making sure that everybody collaborates to their own benefit. But there's a sharper edge as well when it comes to unfair trading practices, those UTCs, which I thought sounded like an infection of some kind, but it is something very relevant to this conversation. So how important is that survey to the work that you're carrying?
Yeah, look, it's hugely important to be able to get that supplier voice, and I think it's very important to the businesses obviously as well, and many of them have expressed that, you know, it fits in with other surveys and stuff that they're doing, so complements that, so that's very welcome. But I think, just to answer your question in terms of moving forward, I mean, we have from the very start have emphasised the collaborative nature of this, and our intention to work with everyone in supporting compliance, and that has certainly not changed. And I think today what this gives us is supplier respondents, and, you know, always there is a limit to what a survey can tell us as well, but obviously we're very willing and able to work in collaboration with everyone in moving to improved fairness and transparency.
What are the three takeaways that you have from the survey? What stands out?
Stands out is high compliance, obviously, with unfair trading law. So obviously, in anyone's language, that's of benefit to us all. I think the second thing is that unfortunately, some suppliers feel that they can't come forward, and I think that's very, very significant, and it's not only to buyers but it's also to the regulator as well, in that you know, of course we want suppliers coming forward and telling us, you know, well, what's going wrong for you, and so we certainly need to improve that, and we want to work with businesses on that. And, you know, I think that finding is problematic as well, because we can see that people, that respondents actually do know who to contact in a business. So there was so we're trying to unpick that perhaps, and we'll work with businesses on that. I think the other one is certainly the innovative practices, as you could see there. So there's lots of work done and lots more work to do, but the innovative practices, you could see how important the communication,
I just
general
want to say that,
communication.
the word that stood out for me in Bertie's presentation was the word portal, right? Because a portal can mean one of two things. It could mean an absolute head melt of a thing that you get lost in and you never see any sense out of, or else it can be an effective way for you to communicate with the structure, not just the individual. So, I mean, there is loads of clever ways, and we've seen examples of that. We've heard mentioned that there is good ways, innovative ways out there that can help suppliers raise issues if they arise.
Yeah, and I think those simple, but like obviously take time and lots of engagement. But there was conferences mentioned there, more communication with suppliers on forecasting and stuff like that, which are just obviously of immense benefit.
If I can come to you, Conor, 948 trading relationships analysed, lots of positives, negatives there as well. What were your takeaways?
I suppose we talked about maybe having 3 takeaways, and for me, there's a couple of things in there. 35 businesses talking about having had unfair trading practices is a significant number on one hand, 35, and it's 1 in 7. It's 1 in 7. It's a lot. However, within that 256 respondents, that they talked about, those 35 people talked about 68 occasions of unfair trading practices. And those 68 occasions of unfair trading practices were out of 948 relationships. That's 1 in 14, not 1 in 7. I'm encouraged actually by that, because we can be here and say that shouldn't practice. In the field of human relationships, there is the reality of what was said, there is the perception of what was said, and there's all those things. But so actually, I'm taking the survey exactly as it said, 35 unfair trading practices, but 68 occasions out of 948.
Is that not 68 too many, though?
Well, I think you can judge it that way. I was actually encouraged by what Mark talked about from the UK, because it's the first time we've seen these numbers for Ireland. And you go, it's 1 in 7, which is 14% of companies talking about an unfair trading practice. But interestingly, 11 years on now in the UK, we're talking about 90% compliance. It's actually not a bad figure to have as a relative number. As
a starting point, okay.
So we're therefore at 86% compliance versus 90 in the UK on one survey. I think it's very positive. That piece of it is very positive. And I think there's two other standouts for me is within the 35 or the 68 different levels of non-compliance or unfair trading practices, we've only brought a number of those forward to deal with suppliers or with the retail trade. But actually 75% of people are very happy having brought that forward. It was dealt with very well. I was pleased to see that number, and I suppose it should encourage you to continue to create those relationships.
But is there not a bit of bravery that has to be involved in that? I take my hat off to the suppliers who picked up the phone and says, actually, do you know what, retailer X, you're acting the maggot here, and you have to address it.
I think it does take bravery, and I fundamentally, in my experience, I would encourage everybody to create those relationships beyond the buyer, as in really solid relationships right across those people, so that you don't feel so brave, so that you're picking up the phone to somebody you know. Yeah.
Okay. Niamh, if I can ask you, what's your takeaway from the survey?
Thanks, Jonathan. I suppose Conor would look at the positive side of it. I'm obviously going to look at the negative side of it and delve like a layer deeper. yes, it is 1 in 7 of direct suppliers did report to UTP, but what stands out to me is the level of reporting of those UTPs to the buyers and the way it was dealt with. So we see there from survey results, 50 to 70%, depending on the retailer that the supplier provided to, did not report to UTP. And what is the reason for this? Well, it's very clear from my role and from what I've been hearing from growers over the last number of years within IFA is the fear of retaliation. And that just cannot be, it has to be addressed within the retailers and the buyers, because the fear of retaliation, if you take the supply chain in agriculture now, the horticulture sector in particular, you could have the likes of broccoli, your cauliflower, etc. You could count on one hand the amount of suppliers that are supplying that product into a retailer now. So if you look at the fear, the model of fear and retaliation, and the risk of that product being delisted, and the real risk that that buyer they can follow that trail back to see who it is if the supply base is so small.
And I'm going to touch on this with you, Niamh, in a moment, but the anonymity piece that Mark spoke about, that's so important and is an inherent part of this. Are you saying because in certain sectors there are so few suppliers that it's like the voting on Tory Island, you might be able to work out who voted for who?
Absolutely, yeah, it is, because look, the reality is consolidation because of certain factors for the last number of years has led to the situation we're in. But in saying that, we do need to build on where we are. And from speaking to Mark and the work that's ongoing in the UK, there are mechanisms that can be put in place to ensure that there is protection for the suppliers who are reporting against UTPs or issues with buyers. And just to come back, Jonathan, my other point there was on the buyers, I suppose, and the issues that were raised with buyers. So 27% of the suppliers surveyed indicated that they had an issue with a buyer in 2024, and less than a quarter of them actually reported that issue for the same reason of fear of retaliation. Again, look, it's not to look on it too negatively, but I suppose we do need to be very aware of the fear of retaliation among among the farmers and the growers out there.
You speak to farmers the whole time. What is that fear based on? Just retaliation. That's what's going through their mind.
It is being delisted. There's only a certain number of places that are going to take your product. It's fear of retaliation, it's fear of losing the contract you might have, or fear of jeopardising the relationship that you have built with that supplier for the last number of years. So, as we said, we can put mechanisms in place, and the work done to date with the Agri-Food Regulator, it has shown a light on this for the first time. And there definitely is ways we can do this, but I suppose it is silence is not the answer here. It will, we do need to speak out. We do have mechanisms in place. I suppose with the IFA, you can confidentially put a report into us, and we can raise it with the retailer. We have a very good open relationship with the Agri-Food Regulator as well, to ensure that the growers and the farmers are supported in this process. And if we can join that up with more mechanisms and look at the UK model and further on the good work of the regulator, we can combat that.
It's not ideal to have to bring your big brother to every single fight that you have to get involved in, but
it's not.
Niamh Lennon, one of the things that stood out there, the majority of suppliers who did say that they experienced an unfair trading practice didn't raise it, even though they knew who they should have raised it with. Now that's a worry, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is hugely concerning. As I said earlier, I'm sure that's a concern for the businesses as well. And certainly from our perspective, I'm very disappointed that suppliers feel that they couldn't talk to the regulator in confidence. Just to reiterate, and Mark from the Grocery Code Adjudicator talked about it earlier in terms of having that, guaranteeing anonymity, and certainly that's what the regulator can do as well, or does do.
Is there, just going back to Niamh's point, where there is potential to be identified, that fear isn't completely removed, is it?
Well, no, I actually think it is, if you like, because a supplier can come forward to us in complete anonymity and chat to us through an issue. And I've always been very clear that, look, one doesn't have to be an expert on UTPs. You can come and talk to us. It may not be a UTP, it could be another issue that you're experiencing. And look, as we were talking about, I think it's worth saying at this point that the the survey, obviously we were asking about the suppliers. I suppose reported incidents, if you like, of UTPs, or if they felt that they categorised as UTPs. But we were also asking about other issues, and the purpose of that is to work with the businesses along the supply chain to inform the development of buyer guidelines. So these are for the purpose of protecting supplier interests, and it's a very interesting function of the regulator, and I think from hearing the discussion here so far, it's even more important now that we go towards, and any of these guidelines will be consulted on. But I suppose it's important to realise that anybody that may be experiencing UTP, there's obviously policies and procedures in organisations to prevent, to comply with the law.
I noticed in what Mark said that there was a go-to in each of the organisations that they engage with. Does your regulator have that kind of arrangement so far?
Larger business have a liaison officer, which is a very useful model that we're kind of only at the start of developing. But I think it's worth saying that when you look at the unfair trading practices, there are a certain amount there that, of course, you can evidence or see quite quickly if it's happening. But there are items there like retaliation that may be a single individual, and do you know what I mean? It could be an individual that is perhaps causing an issue or whatever.
That's the point I was just about to put to Conor. So I have built up, and you can see it in me, and I have the potential, a very successful marmalade business. I've been peeling oranges all my life, and I finally turned it around, and I'm dealing with 3 retailers, and they get on famously with Niamh and Niamh. And then there's this fella called Conor in the middle, and by God, he doesn't like me and I don't like him. And I can't raise it with you because I'm afraid you do 60% of my trade, and I'm afraid to pick up the phone to you, Conor, because if I fall out with you, I don't want to fall out with your business, and obviously the customers love it, but falling out with you would see me delisting. So there has to be an element where there's an individual to individual relationship here that causes a lot of the problems. Mm-hmm. How do we fix that? And buy my marmalade.
Yeah, like in human relationships, we're always going to have people that we get on particularly well with and people that we don't particularly get on well with. Again, in my experience, I think you have to walk in the shoes of the individual you're trying to deal with. I think you have to understand what are the pressures that they're feeling or that they're under. And I think you have to have a relationship conversation with somebody, not just a business relationship conversation with somebody that says, look, you and I aren't quite getting what we'd like. This is where I would like to take my business. What do you need from me? All of those things. Fundamentally, business is still done person to person. And my encouragement and my experience tells me behind every buyer is a human being who's just trying to do a job, and you need to understand each other because maybe you're the problem in that particular, for instance. But in my experience, when you give time and put time into building that relationship, you can get through those issues.
But the other thing that I'm forever doing this with other regulators, Niamh, forgive me guys, if ever somebody does something in the telecom space, I'll go, I've got onto the telecom regulator for you, or something goes wrong with insurance, I'll get onto the financial regulator. In this particular scenario, I can't say, I'm ringing the Agri-Food Regulator because they'd say you're doing what. Now, I think that would put pressure on you and soften your cough ever so slightly to try and find a resolution. But, when there's a double-edged sword to anonymity.
No, I mean, I think we're on a journey here, and I think the start is a great start. So let's not be naive and say it's all about generating that relationship and making that work, because that will solve a significant proportion of your issues. But without being naive, having that process in place, having the Agri-Food Regulator there as a body that says this is how you should or must behave, putting people in place in those large suppliers in order to ensure that those relationships take place, ensuring that the most senior people in those businesses are supporting the compliance piece is a journey. Yeah? And when you listen to Mark talk earlier on, it's clear that it's a journey. So yes, Big Brother is behind in that journey, but don't undermine the power of developing those relationships over time. And yes, I think Big Brother has its place.
Look, one of my sectors is broadcasting, and it's a very regulated sector, and everyone knows that when a complaint comes in, it has to be dealt with in due process. So in each of the radio stations that I work in, there is a point person whose job it is to wade through, it used to be the BAI, but now the IBI, to make sure that the complaint is dealt with. It's not rocket science, and probably it's one for no matter how big or small you are as a retailer to have that there. A number of the comments made by suppliers who are dissatisfied with the buyer around contracts and short-term contracts, hard to get commitments, contracts not being agreed in a timely manner. All of that, Niamh, has a huge impact on the person who is growing carrots or producing wheat or trying to sell a bit of milk.
Absolutely, yeah. So the short-term contract piece comes up again and again. And like if you bring it back, I suppose, if I'm going for a mortgage in the morning and if I have a 6-month contract with my employer, I'm not going to get that mortgage. You can apply the same principle to any to any farmer or grower here today. If they don't have a 12, 18-month contract that is index linked to the price of to the rate of inflation, etc., and they can't plan that out for a number of years, how is that grower or farmer meant to go to the bank to request finance to try and maybe expand? If you look at the horticulture sector, we have a national policy there looking to increase the area of horticulture by 30% in the next 2 years. But if they don't have the ability to receive the financial support and also to be able to plan in terms of rental of land and everything else that comes part of this, how can they do that? So like, I suppose the financial uncertainty that's associated with short-term contracts is massive.
How do we fix that?
We need longer term contracts with an index linked to the price of inflation. So Teagasc are doing an excellent price report for the last 3-4 years now in horticulture, which sets out at the beginning of the year the cost inflation increases per sector. And it's the basis and it's an information piece for growers and for retailers to understand the realities on the ground. Because I think sometimes buyers and CEOs of retailers, and it's just not a criticism, but they can be too reliant on the consolidator that they have in place to ensure that all of the work is being done by them and that they understand the realities on the ground. We do need to try and foster this relationship piece where we have the senior buyers in the retailers establishing a relationship with direct suppliers and indirect suppliers to understand the realities on the ground.
But not wishing to defend the retailers, because they're, well, I was going to say they're well able to do it themselves, but yeah, they're not here. They're there, but not here. They will argue we're on a tough inflationary cycle here as well. We are doing the best we can to try and keep prices down. I can't commit to giving you in past 6 months right now because of the uncertainty that's out there. So they're coming at it from their perspective, you're coming at it from yours.
They are, but if you look at the food price inflation over the last 15 years, I think electricity and CPI were 10 and 2.5 time fold the rise of food inflation in the last 15 years. And I suppose there's been a consolidation of growers. We have to put the most importance here on food security. The retailers want the product available on the shelf, and they don't want I suppose the European market has become too volatile. The product's not available there readily to bring in anymore. So they do have to invest in their growers, and everybody is suffering at the minute in terms of price inflation. But the forecasting piece as well is very important. With that contract piece, the grower cannot have planted the product before they receive information as to what the price will be for the coming year, because it's too late. And then we have to move away from the model where a farmer or a grower is a price taker in the market. Yeah. They need to be planned better.
We go then to problems like we had, was it last year when we had problems with potatoes and that the growing season went to pot and it was trying to be linked to something. Conor, like, farmers need as much certainty as they can. They don't get certainty from the sky because that's always going to be a challenge. How do we get past that? How do we make inroads to give certainty to people who need to plan, what am I doing in 9 months' time?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's kind of outside the conversation in a way, because we're here to talk about the survey and unfair trading practices in the survey and not to solve all the issues.
Never give it a go.
I think it's actually a really difficult thing to solve. In the farming industry, the truth of the matter is you want certainty. And if you are investing in space or additional crop, you need to know that somebody's going to come with you on that journey and help you through that investment journey. So it's an incredibly difficult thing to get right. It would be fantastic, I think, if every retailer said, oh, do you know what, we're going to try with this particular sector of industry to do it on some sort of 3-year rolling contract or something on that basis, because I genuinely do think that would make it easier for growers, and it would protect our horticultural industry, which is at best, you have so much uncertainty with the weather. You don't also want uncertainty with knowing whether somebody is prepared to buy your crop or not.
Niamh, then if I can come back to you, collaboration is key in all of this, right? And you go in with open arms to try and engage with businesses to work out what's going on. Now, it hasn't always been plain sailing to get people to voluntarily assist, and even with this survey, it doesn't appear different. 2 businesses, I'm told, didn't share the survey to their suppliers, so therefore there's a bit of a gap. You can kind of work out from the screen where the gap is. What's your message to those businesses?
Well, look, there's lots of contact that the regulator has with the businesses, and very good relationships as well. But I mean, the 2 businesses in particular, I've expressed my extreme disappointment that they didn't. Share the survey to their suppliers, because I do genuinely think that it's in their best interest. I mean, we are here to and look, we understand that time and effort, there's lots of things going on, so we're
but at
going
the same
to go
time,
again.
it's no harm to throw it out there. I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
No, and but look, but next year is another opportunity. So I mean, everyone can get dressed up again. But like, I mean, I think what we're all trying to collectively do is essentially increase the resilience of the supply chain. So it's in everybody's interest that the issues come up. And I mean, one of the things that is so important today, and certainly for me personally, is that to listen intently to what people have to say, because there, as I said at the start, there's expertise right across the supply chain here, and I, for one, have been trying to understand and increase my understanding of the challenges and opportunities at each phase, because they're so different. And one of the really important parts of today is trying to share those challenges and opportunities. So, and to comment on what Conor was saying, I mean, to walk in somebody else's shoes. So just trying to consider, well, look, what are they trying to deal with, and having the openness. And I mean, people that are here are obviously really interested in this, so we're heartened by that.
Do you know what I find out fascinating is that in every other sector of business, and I speak of this as a business owner, it is about partnership. It's about I have something that'll make your business better. Let's engage in a partnership that benefits both of us, and we both walk away happy. Even with the positivity that's in this report, there's still a them and us sense that is unique to the agri-food sector, and I'm struggling to work out how we got to that place at all.
I think there's there's lots of pressures at different parts of the supply chain, but certainly there is that opportunity to chat through that today, and to increase, to act as a starting point to talking about the issues. I was going to say something else there, but it went completely
That's all right. That's perfectly fine.
To be honest with you,
but I'm happy to move on to Conor.
It'll come back.
Yeah, come back. Conor,
I
I was going to say that is it an unfair assumption to think that a lot of the retailers would treat a mid-sized supplier in the same way that they deal with a Unilever or a Mondelez, who are a global firm, and apply the same practices to them? Because that's not what they're saying in the ads.
It's interesting, you can come into the room with your biases and you can say, well, there's probably much more unfair trading practice than was revealed in the survey, but actually, I'm going to listen to what the survey said. The survey said the level of unfair trading practice that is there, it's a good start point. Let's see where we get to over a number of years. What I think is really interesting is the numbers of companies that took part in the survey, the split of those based on turnover, and actually the split of the answers is remarkably similar to the level of turnover of the overall split. So there doesn't appear to be a difference in the way in which people are treated, small or large.
He's very happy. He's very optimistic, Niamh, isn't he?
Well,
Do you share that optimism?
I am.
Yeah.
I am, because I genuinely believe this industry is about generating those relationships and creating relationships with people that are long lasting. And it's not much different to how we interact with human beings in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Niamh, Brennan?
Yeah, look, as Conor said, it's a starting point, but our main concern is around those who don't speak out and around those areas where it was not reported. And as was seen in the survey there as well, like there's still an awareness piece about the regulator. About 55% are still not aware that it is there for a complaint to be made. So that does need to be built upon. But I think in terms of grower-farmer relationships with retailers, there has been a realisation over the last 3 years that they're an intrinsic part of your operation. You won't have your business unless you have your grower or farmer there. So they do need to foster the Irish grown produce and need to build a relationship with them. And we're doing a piece of work as well outside of the UTPs. So the unfair trading practices are very important, but there's also areas that are not captured by the UTPs. So in conjunction with the Horticulture Industry Forum, IFA are the lead on creating a retail charter. So we're in discussion with all the retailers here in the room trying to implement that. It has been received well to date, and that's looking at areas of trying to lengthen the contracts that growers would receive, and also looking at forecasting practices. So that'll be very important. This time next year, we hope to be in a position that we'll have a retail charter in place alongside the Office of the Food Regulator, hopefully with the additional powers that all of the retailers are mandated to supply that information, and then we'll have a more robust survey. So I think if we take all of the elements that are coming together now between the retail charter, the UTPs, the food regulator, and hopefully the additional powers, I think that we are on a journey that it is improving.
Yeah, no, it is improving, but do you know what? I don't want to single out buyers as a single group in the room here, but what could they do now without cracking the nut, without having to force people into? I mean, it's weird to have to force people into transparency, but to get them to the point that everybody feels the playing field is level. What do we need buyers to do? I'll start with you.
We definitely need to tackle the fear of retaliation. That's number one for me. We need to foster better relationships between all suppliers and buyers, whether a consolidator is involved in that process or not. So the fear of retaliation needs to be removed, and if mispractice is taking place, it needs to be reported, and farmers and growers need to feel safe that they can bring that complaint forward and hopefully solve it. As we've seen, the resolution rates were quite good for those who did bring a UTP
there was
or
only
raise it.
one or two red unhappy faces. Most of the resolutions were good.
They were resolved. Yeah. So we'd hope that if the other 50 or 70% had raised that, you'd see the same resolution rate. So we need to tackle the fear of retaliation on growers. I think that's the practical action for buyers to take away from this today, is to foster relationships and try to take away that fear of retaliation.
It's a mindset shift. I mean, it is a mindset shift, because the battle lines were drawn on this not yesterday or the day before, but probably decades ago. So what can the buyers do today to embed transparency and fairness, Conor?
I think it's the same answer that I've given about trying to walk in their shoes. I think it would be good for them to walk in the shoes of the supplier, the producer, and understand the significant benefit of a longer term deal in that process. I think that would be a step change, and it would allow people to invest in their businesses, and it would probably mean a more sustainable industry for the long term. Yeah.
Yeah. Niamh, the other thing before I go to Slido, do keep questions coming in. I haven't checked yet, but I'm presuming there's some there, which I'll switch to that in a minute. The Minister saying you will get additional powers to get the data that you need. That's going to be welcome by the regulator, I'm presuming, because it'll give you better surveys going forward.
Yeah, this is on the transparency side, and I suppose as the Chair mentioned earlier, there's a lot of interaction between the Minister and colleagues in in the Department of Agriculture in respect of increased powers for the regulator, as everyone knows. So we're optimistic that they will be provided to allow the regulator fully fulfill its function. I think just on the question here to the rest of the panel in terms of next steps, I suppose for me, I would be very disappointed if there was like a them versus us and whoever's involved in them versus us. I suppose the regulator is here as an independent voice, and all our stakeholders, like all the businesses along the supply chain are our stakeholders. And we do obviously have to have particular regard for farmers, fishers and small businesses as more vulnerable actors in the supply chain. But certainly for me, it's about that openness to engage and to look at other stages in the supply chain and say,
your job is to support good practice, protect against bad practice. That's effectively the role of your regulator.
I think it's bigger than. We have specific functions, but there are bigger policy items, and they're mentioned here about security, food security, different items that come up, and those are really important, and they're really important to everybody outside this room as well. So, there's a lot of responsibility on the shoulders here.
Absolutely. They wear it well, though. They do. We'll talk more about that sustainability side in the second session, particularly when it comes to the European side of things. Questions on Slido. Will the slides be available for today's presentations online after the event? Yes, they will. The full survey findings will also be shared, and the whole video, will be online a little bit later on. First question from the floor. Will the regulator look at other areas for price transparency?
I suppose that goes into one of the functions in terms of the analysis of information by price and market data. And yes, so it was mentioned earlier that we had a look at eggs and horticulture, but that and there's information on beef out there in conjunction with processors and the department as well. So yeah, we will be looking at other areas.
How do you provide reassurance for transparency and ensure possible retaliation from retailers is penalised? That's where the regulator has teeth when it comes to unfair trading practices, but reassurance for transparency is slightly different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's probably two different parts to that. In terms of the transparency, that's a function we're trying to develop. Ensure possible retaliation from retailers is penalised. That the commercial retaliation is actually a designated unfair trading practice. So I think that's why I made one of the points earlier about individuals as well, because I know we all have to be responsible for our own actions, but I think we need to think broadly about this and how we perhaps in terms of a buyer how that compliance is monitored as well. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the other thing, of course, is when you shine a spotlight on a collection of businesses, as you have done, that becomes part of their metric as well, because the public can see it. And trust me, they'll see, boardrooms will see what was on the screen a little bit earlier. What does the regulator think about less than 50% of suppliers surveyed know about the Agri-Food Regulator? So, look, it's a new body. You're a couple of years in. This is the first survey, so presumably that's only going to go in the other direction of increasing, isn't it?
Yeah, we're 16 months in. I think, look, we're disappointed, obviously, because we've been doing significant work in terms of raising that awareness. But look, that comes with time as well, and it's not for the lack of effort.
I'd imagine how much of it is down to the fact that you don't think about the regulator until something possibly goes wrong. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that there's a sense of that too. The survey suggested low awareness of the regulator and unfair trading practices in general. How does the panel think the regulator can improve those figures? Niamh, I'll ask you that.
The awareness piece of the regulator, I suppose, visibility. The regulator are already doing that. They're at marts around the country and coming to IFA meetings that we have. And look, if there's a successful prosecution, which has been as well, it does obviously raise the confidence of growers and farmers to be able to follow the process and to ensure that it is robust and it works if you do find yourself in a situation like that. So it improved the figures. Yeah, like I think it's year one. You know, we need to build on this. You see Mark there, and he's 14 years in business with the Grocery Code Adjudicator in the UK. So I think we can only build on those figures and to ensure that we keep it out there. When IFA certainly will be a priority of ours to ensure that we have continue to have the mechanism in place where any grower or farmer can engage with us, and we can have that open conversation and relationship with the retailer, with the regulator.
Conor?
I the same answer really as Niamh. It's year one, and it's great to have a base, isn't it, to grow from next year and monitor the activity from. You know, we should be aware that of the 8 people surveyed, 4 of them have been surveyed for 10 years in the UK, so they're well used to it, and will put processes in place to ensure that, yes, they train their people to behave in a particular way, and also they'll put systems in place to make sure that there's a route through if people don't behave in a particular way. I think it's a great start, and like you say, even the survey itself creates awareness of the office.
Which leads into the next question is coming from the floor. With comments coming from only the top 2 compliant retailers, does this mean most retailers are not happy with having regulatory intervention? I'll put my PR hat on briefly to say that the other retailers in the room, and yes, we should have done that when they saw the other comments being read out, but is there a reluctance to engage? I mean, they're here. I mean, I'm taking a lot from the fact that I've seen the list, I know who's here, that the retailers are in the room, even if they didn't send the comments through like perhaps they should have.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't think we can deduct that from that. To be honest, I mean, as I said, I have the unique. Do you know what I mean? I'm aware of the relationships that we have, and I'm delighted that obviously the retailers are here today as a very
and if you could let the ones who aren't here today know as well, that'd be great. But carry on.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful in terms of. I mean, these are respondents as well. So I mean, it's not like we went out and verified unfair trading practices either. I mean, do you know? And that has to be. I think that's important to say as well.
But you're bringing retailers with you on the journey is the most important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, as I've said to everyone and made it very clear, one of the highlights for me is the relationships that we have built up over the last 16 months, and that is genuine, okay, I mean we can't work without having an overall view of how this is working.
This is a question that is relevant, and I'm glad somebody asked it. A retailer that accounts for 25% of the grocery market has not engaged with the process and represents a large chunk of the market. How can this be resolved? I'm going to put myself into the shoes of the people who are here, who have engaged, who are happy to be here, you know, who might have started on this process thinking one thing and are now at another stage on the journey. How do we get those not in the room on board?
Is that for myself? Yeah.
Unfortunately, Niamh, it is.
Look, yeah, as I said, I'm as disappointed as everyone else, to be honest. I mean, I think this relates to more on the, you know, as in because of the actions of the majority of businesses in terms of the survey, we obviously got a significant response for everybody, then the 8 businesses. So in terms of the other, I suppose, significant function of the regulator, which is to do with the price and market analysis, look, nobody is more disappointed than I am. However, there are, and I think that makes it, you know, it's no surprise that it's very problematic for both the regulator and other businesses. So I mean, you know, and it goes back to I suppose discussions that the board are having with the minister about improved powers.
Get there, it'll be fine. Sustainability and transparency seem to be the key buzzwords, but companies take advantage of vague directives. How do we create clear criteria for what it means? Now, this goes, Conor, like you talk to any of the businesses here, any of the retailers, ESG is the top of their list. They want to find out how they can make biodegradable film that sits on top of the strawberries, and they want to remove plastic from their stores, and they want to do all the good things. So there's a little bit of buzzy around that because they know the customer really values that. How do we get them to value what we're talking about here today?
How do we get them to value? Yeah, you see, you're going to get the positive person again. I think we have a tremendous
Jeez,
food
you must be great crack on a rainy day.
I genuinely think we have a tremendous food industry, second to none in the globe. I think it's incredibly well supported governmentally in terms of brand building and what we do to try to generate growth for businesses. I think we have a tremendous food industry, farming industry, that is in danger that it won't be sustainable if we can't make sure that it is deeply, that it's supported in a long-term way to allow investment. I think that's a particular piece that would be great to see. But fundamentally, I think this is a new venture for us, and I think suddenly we're going to get, how do you make this right and work? You do that over time. You do that by creating awareness. You do that by making sure that the practices that we're talking about, which are restricted, are eliminated, by making sure that people in both supplier and in customer are well trained.
Yeah.
And then you have a system in place that people respect, I think, that allows people to highlight issues. Niamh made a point about, don't be afraid to bring up that issue internally in that business, because I would be hopeful it would be resolved.
One of the things, Niamh, if I can just finish on this point with you, is that when businesses are going, their world is full of commercial sensitivity. Everything is shrouded in commercial sensitivity because it's so competitive, it's cutthroat, it's a weird business, but very cutthroat. Do we have to deleverage it from that? Because I'd imagine a lot of this practice is down to the idea that if you say the wrong thing, you'll end up in the wrong job, if I could put it that way. How do we deleverage transparency from commercial sensitivity?
So the commercial sensitivity piece, yeah, like I think the transparency piece needs to be front and centre, but it's the financial sustainability of the grower as well. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. But I mean, the idea that anyone making a decision going, we can't tell anyone anything because we'd be afraid that the other crowd will find out about it. That's the problem. And I'd imagine a lot of that is down to, that's the reluctance to be transparent for some of them. How do we fix that? How can growers turn around and say, my relationship is with you, this is why we need it, and this is why we'll be better for it if we're open with each other?
Yeah, well, I suppose if you follow the process and to begin to, if retailers trying to foster that relationship with the grower, ensure that they do have the financial stability as well, so they're transparent, and that, you know, if they have an issue and they can raise it and it'll be dealt with, I suppose, Jonathan, that will deal with some of that, you know, that you don't want to pay a case where, you know, growers feel that one grower is being pitched against the other. It needs to be transparent to say, like, we want Irish product on the shelf, and if there is a reason why a product is delisted for some reason, like come back to your marmalade example, if you do not get the contract, it needs to be the UTP piece around the commercial retaliation, that needs to be followed through to ensure that, you know, it is resolved and it's reported upon, that, you know, if you are delisted for a reason that is unfair, that it is captured.
Niamh, just a last point to you on this. We have our first survey. We're out of the blocks on this. We know what good looks like. We know what bad looks like in this. What will be success for when all of these good people are back in this room next year?
Success looks like working together, basically, and I think what we've already been talking about is you actually using the survey to improve. So there's no point in doing any of this if there's not going to be any action taken off. So we are in the very lucky position that we have regular interactions with businesses and with these businesses and others, and that, you know, that for me is success. Looking at it, what can we learn from this? Can we move on?
And more importantly, the conversations that are going to be had outside in a few minutes as well, where they digest everything that we've talked about over the last while over a cup of coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause for Leath Lenehan, Conor Kilduff and Niamh Brennan. We'll leave it go that way. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who put their questions in on Slido. Very good questions in there, and the ones that some of which I was afraid to ask myself, but she asked them for me. So thank you.